Yeah, I hear you good. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you good. How you feeling, King?
Oh, I'm all right. I can't complain, brother. Alhamdulillah.
Oh yeah, no doubt, most definitely. Man, it's definitely an honor every time I speak with you. So I'm definitely glad to have you on the podcast.
Always good to see you doing good work, man. You're real consistent in what you're doing, and that's one of the things that is lacking amongst a lot of our younger people. They're not consistent, except for in things that they can be inconsistent at. But I'm glad to see you
Yeah,
hanging in there. Congratulations.
definitely, definitely. You inspiring me. You keeping me going. You giving me hope. So when I make it to your age, I gotta still keep
Alhamdulillah.
doing what you doing.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, yeah. So I know you got moves to make, so we're gonna get right into it. A lot of the viewers they may not recognize you or know who you are, so let them know what your name is and definitely where you're from.
Mutawaf A Shaheed is my name. I'm the Imam of one of the masjids here in Cleveland, Ohio. And I've been doing this one particular part of my life in Islam for about 55 years. And prior to that, I was involved in the Black Nationalist movement or the Republic of New Libya. And then, in fact, um, Brother Taye's uncle and I were like close, and we worked together in that movement. He was with the Afro set, and I was with the Republic of New Libya, but we all had the same goals in trying to bring about a change in our communities. And most of our youth was spent doing that.
Oh yeah, I definitely appreciate you for your service. Let me see. Now I gotta ask you, like, because a lot of the viewers they may not be familiar with the history of Cleveland. You kind of touched on it, but when you was coming up, what was Cleveland like, for a young black man?
Oh well, it basically really the infrastructure of the oppression has really never changed. It's just changed names in terms of who was running it. But back there, then it just had you had a choice of the front of the hand or the back of the hand, but it was the same hand. And it was a cultural revolution in our neighborhoods, essentially because of the fact that we were tired of the status quo and what was supposed to be okay and what was approved, what kind of hairstyle was approved, what kind of clothes were approved. And it didn't make any difference really what kind of clothes you had or what hairstyle you had. It wasn't going to change for you regardless. So people basically rejected that mindset and rejected those status quo uh, pieces in order to establish our own identity. And that identity is linked culturally back to Africa, directly back to Africa. And there was no central part of Africa that it related to. It was just African culture, just overall. And that was what we kind of gravitated to. We were a part of a group called the Moon Two Poets, and your uncle Omar and Sababa Akili and a few other brothers were, what they would call militant poets. And we used to do these shows in the park and in different venues that were set up for us to perform in. And it was all strong pro-black, anti-oppression expressions. That was the kind of the status quo. And everybody used to say, even if they weren't a nationalist, but there was a respect for it because the nationalists basically stood up and stood out against all of those things that had become status quo in our neighborhood: the police brutality, the store owners selling rotten food, and all of those kind of things. The youth had just gotten tired of it, and they weren't going to deal with it anymore. And we had a few OGs who had been around, like at that time they had come from the Korean War, and they were kind of like the stalwarts and the brothers who kind of engaged the young brothers, who at the time I was in my 20s, so I was one of the young brothers. And brothers were real serious because the conditions had just gotten worse and worse. The neighborhoods were crowded. You couldn't get insurance. You couldn't buy a house. You couldn't get a job. All of these kind of things. And people were piled on top of each other. And then on top of that, with all of that misery that was going on, then they would send in these white racist police who would just exacerbate everything and just come in and make things worse in terms of your daily living. You couldn't walk down the street. You couldn't express yourself culturally. All of these kind of things were going on, and it just boiled over to what we used to call back then the pot. And that's what led to that shootout in Cleveland in 1968. I think there's a book out called Ballots and Bullets, Black Political Power and Urban Guerrilla Warfare, Cleveland, 1968. That kind of gives you some details of what was going on in the city at that time by the administration, who cared nothing about the people who lived there. They were just a bunch of white racists who lived in their own world, and they didn't care anything what the police did because it didn't have any reflection upon them. And they never expected anybody to ever get up and do something about it. And it had nothing to do with winning or losing. It had something to do with you not going home tonight either. That was the bottom line. When I talked to Ahmed from the penitentiary, because we worked in the penitentiary when the brothers went down there who survived that. And I was talking to Ahmed one day on death row, and he said, Imam, that wasn't really necessarily about winning or losing. It was just, you're not going home tonight. I'm not going home, neither are you. And it was that main stand that people took that made a lot of difference in terms of the respect. And now there wasn't just fear going one way. The fear was going the other way as well. So that was kind of like the climate in most of the major cities in the United States, because it was like a rubber stamp. Oh, what are you doing to the blacks there? Well, we're doing this. What are you doing? Well, we're doing this. So it was a rubber stamp that they used around every urban community in the United States. Cleveland just got fed up with it first and dealt with it.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely, man. I appreciate you sharing that history that you was definitely a part of. And like you said, that was very important. It's like things haven't changed. You know, we still in this situation, we still in this fight, but you know, we may have a little bit more technology. But I don't know. I can ask you, do you feel like the spirit of the people in terms of putting up that fight, is it about the same, or are we even in the worst position? Are we more comfortable than we were at that time?
Well, I think your question is the answer. it, it actually, no, it's worse. It's actually worse because a lot of these Negroes think that they have arrived, and the positions that they occupy are positions of maintaining, upholding the status quo. Okay, and you don't have the people back then. You could speak to people on the street. You can get. We used to say salam, and the people would respect that and respond back. There was a whole lot more unity in the community. And the community at that point in time, there were a lot of stores that were owned actually by African Americans. Some of the bars, some of the stores, some of the restaurants, and they were owned actually by the African Americans. And there was a whole lot more respect for each other then than there is now. And I think that one of the things that they used to try to disperse the Black nationalist movement was drugs. They started just pouring heroin and drugs of that nature into the neighborhood, pharmaceutical drugs and heroin into the neighborhood. You have kids, 14, 15-year-olds, had pockets full of heroin. That was not an oddity at the time. So all of those tactics that they used in terms of trying to break up the nationalist movement are the same tactics that they use now. It's just a different game. It's the same hand. It's just the front or the back of the same hand. And actually, the saying that I use is that in unity there's treason, because in any time that you try to unify on any particular subject matter that confronts you from the status quo, you become an enemy of the state. And that's what you have now. And you have to realize that actually many Black people, going back from the Civil War and everything else, when you fought on the side of our government, you were taking part of the atrocities. So you have the same amount of responsibility. You could have said no, but you fought in World War One, you fought in World War Two, you fought in Vietnam, Korean War, you fought in Afghanistan, and the situation is still the same for you. It makes no difference what sacrifices you make in terms of participating in atrocities or genocide or whatever. There's never any gratitude shown to you ever because the people don't feel that you're human, and they don't have to give you any gratitude simply because of the fact you are still a slave. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I appreciate you. I appreciate you. Now I can ask you a little bit about the poetry. At what age did you actually like fall in love with poetry? Like, man, this is cool. This is something that I really want to do and take serious.
Well, it was a strange thing because I was failing English in the 7th grade. And I mean, and I didn't do it. It wasn't a tactic or anything that I used. But one day I went home and I wrote a poem. That was the first poem I ever wrote. And I don't remember the name of it. I can't remember the context. I don't know what the theme was. But when I took it to school to show the English teacher, his name was Mr. Harvey, and it was at Alexander Hamilton Junior High School. And he saw the poem, he read it, and he said, "Man, why weren't you doing things like this all semester?" And I wound up getting a D out of it rather than an F out of the class. So that was the first time he kind of like inspired me because he saw something that I didn't see. And I gave it to him because he was an English teacher. So I said, this is something in writing. The English teachers to see it for anybody else. And then that kind of became a mainstay of mine. So I've been writing for that particular period of time. I took about a 30-something year hiatus from writing when I became a Muslim. And then recently, like in 99 or 2000, I started writing again. And since I've been able to publish about 40 books of different genre. Okay, so it became one of my favorite pastimes, if you would call it a pastime. And it started back when I got out of high school and I moved to Sweden. I bought a one-way ticket to Sweden, and I used to write articles, small articles for a photographer. He used to sell his pictures to newspapers, magazines over there in Sweden, and I would write some of the narratives, for some of those pictures that he took. And so when I got back here, there was a bunch of things that happened. I was on the run from Interpol to track me down. And when I got back here, I got involved with the Moon Two Poets after a couple of years being back here, and also got involved with the music and started playing with various jazz musicians. Albert Otto, he was from Cleveland as well. And, like that. So that's kind of been my artistic expression and involvement over the years until this day.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. Like you say, you took a 30-year hiatus and got right back, where you left off with it
Yeah.
and
Now,
got
I have
40
more
different
experiences
projects.
now to
Hmm.
express myself than I did in those earlier days.
Definitely, definitely, definitely. Now I want to ask you this. Now going into the Muntu poets at that time, was that something that was new for you? I mean, being around other poets, like up until that time, was you just writing poetry just for yourself and just
Yeah.
reading it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The Moon Two Poets, that was good because our mentor was Russell Atkins. And Russell Atkins was one of the inventors of what they call concrete poetry. And his writing style was different. And I think what drew us to him, especially the young brothers who were like, conscious, uh, it drew us to Russell because Russell in himself, he was a rebel in a literary sense. He was a rebel. He was into something new, and we may not have known it at the time, but there was something about him that drew us to him. He was not critical. He was helpful. He kind of understood where we were coming from. He was much older than us, but he understood where we were coming from because he was facing the same kind of opposition on his level that we were facing on our level. So we were kind of drawn to him, and it was good working with other poets because you had an opportunity to see where everybody was in terms of their understanding of what we were going through at that time as young people, because most of the overwhelming majority of the people in that group were young people, and it was an eclectic group of people because you had people who would have been considered bourgeois, but at that time in the 60s, in that time, everybody in their own way was rebelling against the status quo. They may not have done it the way that other people did it, more militant situation, but they were outspoken on their level of consciousness, on their level of expression. They were conscious about the difficulties that our people were facing, and everybody was involved on some level. Your uncle and Sabawa, myself, Bill Russell, these were the people who were part of Moon Two Poets. We were more, I guess you say, outspoken and critical in a massive way against the status quo, against the police, against the system, against the politicians. That was a lot of our poetry was geared in that direction. Norman Jordan was also involved, and he had a different way, and he expressed his rebellion. But ours was raw, ours was real raw, And I remember my father coming to one of the sessions that we did at one of the parks, because they had these. You could go to these parks and play music and recite poetry. My father attended one of those events, and he loved it, man. He loved it because he, in his own way, had been discriminated against, like most of our people, in terms of getting jobs. He was an attorney. He graduated in the top third of his class from Western Reserve University, and the jobs that he qualified for, high-paying jobs, prestigious jobs that he qualified for, he couldn't get, because I guess his parents told him, my grandparents, all you have to do is get an education, and that wasn't true. It's not true. And you can still get those kind of jobs, but it depends on what you're going to, who are you representing? And the problem is we don't represent ourselves. We represent somebody else. Okay. So in terms of the poetry and being connected to other poets, there was a group of us that found our groove, and we would perform together. So I loved it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm a historian, so I'm still doing my research. I'm still writing. I'm trying to do a little book about hip hop, and I kind of refer back to me writing about the Afro set and the Muntu poets, and I see a lot of the things that y'all was doing was gearing what would become hip hop. In terms of being MCs and the drums, and
Right.
but y'all was talking about real issues.
Right. Yeah, right. What happened is that really at that point in time, I mean, I guess, being young, which we all were, we had a different perspective. Our thing was like, screw it. Okay, whatever the vibe is, we don't care. And I don't think any of us had we didn't have a lot of kids. We didn't have a lot of other responsibilities. So people can be cornered with those kind of things. For an example, like right now, I don't know. Obviously, these people have gotten some kind of FISA warrant where they can tap my phone and do all these other things. Every time I reach out for somebody to get something done in the community, they contact these people and tell them don't deal with us, especially the athletes. There was a young brother, a boxer, who had just become Muslim. And what happened, I tried to put a comment on the Facebook page. They blocked the comment. They don't want my voice heard anywhere. No place. They've done everything that they could to do that. I tried to get my Freedom of Information Act. They refused it. They won't even get it to won't even give it to the Congresswoman. So the voices that don't reflect the status quo, they're going to do everything they can do to block those voices. So you can get ready. Every African American in this country needs to put in a request for his Freedom of Information Act. You might be surprised what you find in there if they give it to you. That's what you should do. Everybody you can talk to who's African American in this country, they need to put in for their Freedom of Information Act. That's what they need to do.
Yeah, definitely. Because I done made a couple requests in reference to the Freedom of Information Act, and like you say, if they give it to you, because sometimes they'll flat out just deny you, and then in other cases, it may take 10, 15. I'm still waiting on stuff from my uncle from a request from over 10 years ago.
Oh yeah, yeah. One of the things that they'll do is say that it's still an open investigation. So we can't issue anything at this point. But I haven't gotten any response. I went through the Congresswoman's office, and I talked to one of her aides, and they said there was really nothing we can do. We don't have any experience in dealing with these people. And I'm like, okay. So that was the end of that. So I just keep it moving, man. You know, you don't control anything. So if you don't control something, you don't have a lot of responsibility for the outcome.
Yeah, that's true. That's true indeed. Now, I gotta ask you. You appeared in a movie, a classic. Man, I want to ask you. You know, how did that even come about, and what was that experience like?
Yeah. Oh, you're talking about Uptight. Yeah, that was the movie Uptight. It was directed by Jules Dassin. And it was so strange, man, because it was Jules Dassin. Um, uh, there was Ruby D. There was Julian Mayfield, uh, Max Julian. A lot of those G2 Kumbuku, a lot of those African Americans who appeared in that movie, that was supposed to have been one of the first black exploitation movies, but it turned out it had nothing to do with black exploitation at all. And Julian Mayfield himself was an activist with the RNA, and the brother out of Detroit, um, he went over to China. What is his name?
Was that the one that was a lawyer,
What was his name?
Milton Henry?
Huh?
Was it Milton Henry?
No, he was with him. They were in the same group in the Republic of New Africa.
Oh,
Yeah,
Robert F. Williams.
yeah, that was him. That was him.
Oh, okay.
Max Julian, he was an activist. Okay, and Jules Dassin had just come back from being banned because they were calling him a communist during the McCarthy era. So there was a confluence of a lot of activists, uh, 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 entertainers, man, that came together at that time. It was the perfect timing. And what happened is a lot of us got hired to do security, crowd control. All right. So outside of the barbershop where that one the shot I was in, uh, Jules Dassin saw me out there along with a couple other brothers and told his guys to go out there and get them and bring them inside. And so as it turned out, they came outside and got myself, a few other brothers, and brought us inside. And they broke for lunch. And I hooked up with Max Julian and Chitu Kumbuku. And they took me around the corner and we went up these stairs behind this apartment building and we smoked a joint. You know, I don't know where they got that weed from, man, but I already thought I was in Hollywood. After I smoked that joint, I thought I was already in Hollywood, man. You know, and they were some real regular guys, man. I mean, they talked just like you and I talk. It wasn't no highfalutin, stuck up kind of thing. They was real brothers, you know. And that whole set, man, was like that. That whole set was like that. I mean, it was a real brotherhood type thing, even amongst the actors and stuff, you know. And Jules Dassin, he was just a real kind of guy, you know, and he had gone through that kind of oppression that we were continuing to go through. I think this was his first movie since he came back into the United States. So yeah, that's how that came about. And then we wound up being in 3 or 4 other shots, and it was a good experience, man.
Okay, okay, cool, man. You was yeah, it was some heavy hitters in there. I mean, Ruby D. I mean, she's definitely recognized as one of the pioneers for acting for our people. Max
Oh
Julian,
yeah, for
you know,
sure, man.
another
Her, Max
legend.
Julian,
Hmm.
Roscoe Lee Brown. A lot of these
Hmm.
people, every African American in this country goes through something similar. I don't care what it is that you're doing, because your life is like you're running a gauntlet from the time that you're born to the time you die. On every side of the road, there's somebody there to obstruct your movement on every level. I went to a high school that was 50-50. It was half white, half black. And these weren't like, people from Pepper Pike or Shaker Heights. These are like affluent neighborhoods here in Cleveland. They were like regular blue collar people, had blue collar parents and everything else. And what happened is these people you went to school with, these people you graduated, you played basketball with, you played football with, baseball, whatever your sport was, if you were in the cultural club and the magazines, if you wrote newspaper, whatever you did, these people were the ones when they graduated from high school, they went to take over from their parents. And what they did is what their parents did. So now you are marginalized by the same people you went to school with. The same people that was passing you the basketball, the same people who was handing you the football, running track. These are the same people, man. So you, from the time you're born to the time you die, you're running a gauntlet. And the whole idea is that when their parents talk to them, they talk to them about leadership and what they had to do to maintain the status quo if they wanted to stay in power. When our parents talked to us, they were talking about how we could get involved in the society. And actually, there was never any talk of rebelling. It was always, you got to try to fit in, where you can get in. And, but doing that, it was only a certain amount of places you were going to fit in. And if you weren't going to be in a position to maintain the slavery, to maintain the status quo, then, you weren't going to get in. You're going to go to the penitentiary for anything that you would do to be outside what was considered the norm. You ran the gauntlet from the time you entered school, from the educational level. You're being bludgeoned with lies, being bludgeoned with all these false ideas and all kind of madness, man. And if you didn't fit in, if you didn't become a part of it, well, you just wound up being something else. So that was always the parable that I used. Somebody asked me, say, you go to your high school reunion? I said, for what? What am I go there for, man? Now, all these people have retired. Their whole life has been spent essentially making sure that you got no further. They did their fathers' and mothers' jobs. Okay? Now, all of a sudden, we're going to sit down and eat a sandwich together. I'm not interested, man. You done spent 50 years of your life holding me and my people back. Now, some kind of way, I'm going to go somewhere and break some bread with you. It don't make sense. And I don't hate anybody.
Okay. Man, you said a lot. I mean, you're right. You're right. They maintaining the status quo and so forth. But now I got to ask you about, we talked a little bit about the acting. We talked a little bit about the poetry. Now, how did you get into the music?
Oh, okay. What happened is that I went to school with a brother who was the brother to Albert Eiler. His name was Donald Eiler, right? And we ran track together and we hung out after high school. And one day, he kept telling me about his brother was in this music, and the music was kind of different. So when I first met his brother, I was playing a tenor saxophone. It was a Busher 400. And so he came by the house. I was living with my parents, and he took his mouthpiece off of his horn and put it on my horn. And when he started playing the horn, I said, well, you know what? I think I'm going to change instruments, man, So as it turned out, he was the one that recommended that I go to Sweden because I was headed to India. All right. And because in classes, I used to look at these geography books. And I said, now, when I get out of school, where am I going to go? Because I was just going to leave the country. And when I did finally leave, it was at his suggestion that I go to Sweden. So I worked long enough to get a one-way ticket, $40 in my pocket, and I landed in Stockholm, Sweden. And on one of those evenings, there was a place called Nollen. Nollen was a place where it had natural acoustics. Every room you went into had very good acoustics. And a lot of musicians, they would practice there. And, when Duke Ellington and those different jazz groups would come into town at night, they would go and play, there at that place. And it was like an all night joint. Everybody played all night. So one day I went there and there was a bass violin sitting in the corner. And there was nobody there. So I said, man, let me mess with this here. So I already knew all of the stance and how you had to stand and all that. I knew that. I didn't know anything else though. Okay. So I'm in there pulling on the strings and, going fingerboard and all that. So this guy comes in. He was a West Indian brother. His name was Les. And he had a group. And he heard me playing. So he said, hey, man, you want to play a gig with me? And I started laughing. I said, well, I sound that bad, huh, man? He said, no, man. No, he said, no, I got a gig up in the north of Sweden. The north of Sweden is like the south in the United States in terms of being rural, how it used to be anyway. And he was going to go up there. I said, no, I can't do that, man. I can't play. He said, no, man, all you got to do is be black. and hold the bass, they don't know the difference. Okay. I said, no, I can't do that, man. I said, that's for me, that's fake. So when I got back to the United States, there was a company, a department store named Higbee's, was located down on Public Square or somewhere in that area. And they had what they called a display bass. You know, it wasn't brand new, but it was good. It worked fine. So I purchased that, and then I started playing bass. So one day I was invited after about a year of practice. I was invited by Albert to join him in playing some gigs, you know. And as it turned out, I did some recordings with him. Uh, uh, I did on his box set, I got a few recordings that I did with him. I went to New York and I played there. I played practice with my main man, the drummer. I think Norman Connors. I think we played a gig together, and he asked me about coming up there. You know, I said, no, man, I'm on probation, which I was. You know, and Norman had a nice house, man. Norman was living on Central Park, polished wooden floors, man. Had a nice lady coming in who was his wife. She bags of groceries coming in. And I had just spent the night at 141st in Amsterdam in Harlem. There was, you had to keep the door open for circulation to get into the apartment. It was hot. You understand? They had mice and roaches and all that. I said, and I asked him, I said, hey, man, would I be able to have a house like this? He kind of laughed, you know. I said, no, man, I got to live in Cleveland because I'm on probation, which I was on probation. And I could have got it switched, but what for? To live with some roaches? I don't think so, man. So the people who made those sacrifices, they deserve all of the credit. You know, anybody who went through that, anybody who suffered, I wasn't prepared to do that. Okay. So, you know, and plus I felt that I would get more of my point across by writing rather than in the music. And then I'm watching all these musicians getting exploited. You understand? They living with rats and roaches and can't eat and can't begging for this, that, and the other. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that, man, because that's another form of exploitation. And I always been on that vibe about exploitation since I was young. So I just said, no, I'm done with that. Okay. And then I became the imam after I became Muslim. And so that definitely ruled out me going playing in the bars and all in other spots, you know, because we played at a lot of different places, a lot of different venues that we played. It wasn't just bars, you know, it was like, and we played like a 4-hour concert down at Antioch in a college here in Ohio. And it was never recorded, man. Never recorded. You know, that's one of those things that wasn't recorded. But I'm on his box set. Then he just got this re-release, this got CD release called Albert Eiler Live at the La Cave. I think it was recorded in 1966. It was a 2-day thing. I was on that. I was on there on that too. Okay. And the acoustics at the time were horrible, but now they're supposed to have improved acoustics. That just came out about this year sometime.
Wow, wow, that's amazing. Man, you made some good points. I kind of feel like, they make being a musician so glamorous, but
No,
a lot of times the fans, we get the finished product. We see the music video, we hear the music, but we don't realize what those artists go through just to make it. Like you say, having to live with the rats and the roaches, and then ultimately it's like sharecropping. They do all this work, and at the end of the year, they don't get paid, and they not only don't get paid, they in debt. So it's just a
yeah,
horrible
that's
cycle.
that the whole thing. Like I said about the gauntlet, no matter what part of life that you pursue, along that path, there are those waiting on you. I just wrote a peep said, look out for the talent scouts. Look out for the talent scouts because they around here to try to rob you. Okay, it's a whole piece to that, you know. But I'm just saying that's the kind of stuff that you have to encounter all your life. And see, the thing about it, this new trend is through the point that you brought up earlier was about the informational age and all that. So now what happens is you have a lot of African Americans who have access to their real history, and they find out about all these lies that have been told, and all this kind of stuff. Even there, the gauntlet is waiting because you don't know what part of that is misinformation. And the bottom line is with these people is this. T. This is the bottom line. I don't care what you know. I don't care how much knowledge you have. I don't care how much money you have. I don't care how spiritual you may be. I don't much care how much of an atheist you are. I don't care if you can write. I don't care what you do. As long as you can't do anything about it, I don't care. And that's the position that we are in. You may have all this information, all this knowledge, but what can you do about it to change the condition in which the people live in? That's their only concern. They, as long as you can't do nothing about that, they're good.
Man, yeah, the nail on the head on that one, exactly. Man, so I got maybe like one more question. I know you got to make some moves. If you could just talk about becoming a Muslim, becoming an imam, what that means to you, you know, how it changed your life, and then talk a little bit about some of the work that you have done. I mean, you've done so much for, like you said, almost 5 decades now. You done went into the prisons, you know, you done did it all. So if you could at least, you know, let them know about that a little bit.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. You asked that question because what happened is at the end of the Black nationalist movement, as I saw it, it was in the 70s. That kind of like was everything was petering out at that point in time. And the only other thing that was left, as far as I was able to see, was something that had to be more substantial than just being African American. There had to be a structure that needed to be put in place, a government that needed to be put in place in order to move forward as a people. And I saw that structure as Islam because there were already rules and regulations. You had to be just more than just being an African American. You know, you had to be you had to follow the rules, and everybody had to follow the same rules, whether they were in leadership or they were just a person going to the mosque. You had the same rules that governed you that governed me. And we always say there's no big eyes and little U's in Islam. Everybody's on the same plane. And I said, wow, that this kind of stuff makes sense. And there was some information that I got initially where I was kind of turned off. You know, I was like, I don't know if I can do that. You know, but I saw the structure as being something that was important. But what I didn't realize at the time was that if you didn't do all of it, then the structure wouldn't work because the structure was built on doing all of it. All right. And then so what happened is that I was going to school. I was taking up journalism and I was doing pretty good. I had an A in the first semester. And then the Ahmed, Nandu, all the brothers that was locked up, they was headed down to the penitentiary. We started working in the county jail, city jail, the county jail, then the workhouse. And then all these brothers was being disseminated to all these other penitentiaries. So there was a request. There were some older people and foreign brothers going into the prisons and stuff. They couldn't relate to our people. And the older ones was like Uncle Tom's. Well, actually, it's Sambo. Uncle Tom, I understand, was pretty cool. Okay, Sambo was the one that was always the problem. All right, so the brothers, you know, in the joint, and it was the sisters too, because some of them got locked up in Marysville. So what we did when we signed the first contract with any state, and I challenge anybody to prove it any different. If they can prove it, I'm down with it. But if you can't, don't talk about it. All right. We signed a contract with the state of Ohio to provide religious services for the Muslims because they had no representation in the prisons. And to have a Quran was contraband. To give somebody talk on the yard and say salam alaikum, that was contraband. You go into the hole. You couldn't grow a beard. You couldn't do anything. So once we got in there, we sued the state and won the decision in federal district court through Judge Canary. And it stated that the Muslims now could wear beards, they could wear kufis, they could get Qurans, they could get all those things in the penitentiary. So, you know, as that at one time, you know, we must have had over a couple hundred Muslims spread out through all the prisons in Ohio. There's more prisons in Ohio now than there were then. In fact, Ohio is the 5th largest state with prisons in the country. You know, the fifth, you know, okay? So what happened eventually, they ran us out of there, okay? And so what we did was we got heavily involved in reentry. So when a brother came out of the joint, you know, he could come to the mosque and he could stay there, you know, as long as he was obeying the rules, not just our rules, but the rules of the parole board. In other words, you couldn't come there and we're going to be complicit in breaking the law. That wasn't going to happen. Our relationship was, we established a good relationship with the authorities based on the fact that we weren't coming in there trying to take over the prison. All right. And some people thought that was going to happen and they were going to be able to use that. You know, guys was asking me to bring their marijuana into the joint and all that. So, yeah, so I could be in the cell next to you, man. I don't think so. Okay, so we had a real good relationship with them, but the people higher up saw that it was too much influence. So the first contract that I signed, Tate, was like, I don't know, you may be too young to remember onion skin paper. Okay, it was a real thin, light paper. And, you know, I signed it. It was a one-page contract. Before we left out of there in 73, that thing looked like the New York Yellow Pages. Okay, so we told the brothers we wasn't going to sign that. All right, and we was going to leave out from in there. So as time is going by, what happens is they controlled the government through their agencies, controlled the Muslim celebrities. All right, and they make sure that they're not having access to the African American masjids. They send them to the immigrant places because immigrant places, for the most part, you understand the status quo people, you know, and they ain't not trying to do this, and they don't care nothing about you because number one, they're not from your culture. That's number one. Number two, most of them, many of them are educated. You can't go to the steakhouse with them every day, so you ain't got economics in common with them. Okay, you don't speak their language, not really. Okay, you may go to the university and learn about this and learn about that. But my question is, after you go and get all this knowledge, where are you going to implement it? Okay, because the immigrants, they're not trying to implement no Sharia or nothing else like that. They're just trying to fit into the status quo. And that's what they do. So what the government has done is channeled cats like Mike Tyson, you understand, this new young brother who's a boxer, who did the football players, basketball players, all of them, man, they channel them to the immigrant mosque just to make sure that they won't have any impact because financially they could, you know, on the African American communities. It's the gauntlet, brother, all the way through this shenanigan. It's the gauntlet. So, you know, that's what we still do. You know, we still try to engage in the community, feed the homeless. You know, we tried to put some unity pieces together with some of the schools around. As soon as we started making contact with the schools, somebody called the schools, and it had to be somebody powerful because it scared the people to death, man. They wouldn't return phone calls, text messages, nothing, man. It scared the people to death. Who you know who could scare people like that, man? You know, I'm just saying, you know, that's what's happening. We were dealing with a pharmaceutical company trying to make free medication do for anybody really, but there's 156 million Americans who don't have no insurance and can't get no medicine. We try to make an impact there. They called the pharmaceutical company, man, told them don't deal with us. You understand? Mike Tyson was doing an interview and he was quoting about Cleveland. And he was saying that he lived in Cleveland for 10 years. Okay. And that he said, yeah, in Cleveland, man, you know, you come to that little bit of town, you be thinking they weak and all that stuff. He said, that's a dangerous place. Well, he used some expletives, you understand? He said, and this was the quote. He said, it's all kind of gangsters that live there. Okay, so what do the all kinds mean, man? You a gangster or what? Okay, but all kind of gangsters. So what has happened, people had gone to him, gone to the cats who was Muslim from the Browns. Every time somebody comes through there, they go to the ownership and tell them, don't deal with them. And whatever they tell them scares them to death. And you know, people don't know us. You understand? They come to make money. They ain't about, you know, nothing else. Especially them young people, they don't care nothing about nothing else. And when somebody tells them, look, you better not do this. If you remember Walter Beach was sitting on the team bus and he was reading a book. I can't remember the name of the book, but it was black oriented. Art Modell walked up to him and told him, say, what you reading there, Walter? And he told him what he was reading. He told him, yeah, you probably shouldn't be reading that. That's what he told him. Ask Walter, he'll tell you. You understand? So that's it with us. We migrated from the nationalist movement to Islam, which was more dynamic because initially it held the promise of bringing people together from every walk of life, bringing people together from any ethnicity, bringing white people together, bringing blacks, Chinese, everything. That's a problem, bro. You understand? Anybody who goes around trying to do that, that's treason. All right. So that's why I said in unity, there's treason. So that's how we did that. And that's the lay of the land as I speak.
Wow, I appreciate you breaking it down, man. Okay, I got one last question for you for the viewers. If they want to check out some of your poetry or some of your work, or they want to show you support, or do you have a website, or do you have a place where they can check out, your books, or anything that you got going on?
Yeah, I think it's a Facebook CE. Hey man, I don't really keep up with it, but it's on. I think it's Amazon or Facebook or something. Is CE Shy. I write under the pen name of CE Shy. They could actually look it up on Google or Amazon. I got about 40 books, man. And I went with a new publisher. I was with an old publisher. He was a good dude, man. Me and him, we put a lot of work in, a lot of it together, And we had some differences, which really was small when I think about it now. But he was a good dude. His name was Kelly McElroy. And I published a lot with him. And then I'm dealing with Inner Child Press. Okay, my latest books have come out on the Inner Child Press. And, they got this thing called a Poetry Posse. And they do stuff every month. And it's Inner Child Press. You can look it up. And Poet of the Year. And those are the places where you could find my work.
Oh, okay, okay. And then, like I said, it's pre-recorded, so once I edit it, if you have any links, like you want them to get to a particular book or anything like that, then I could throw it in the comments and they can click right and go straight to it.
Oh, okay. All right. All right.
Yeah, yeah. So it's good to see you again,
Hey,
King. I
man, it's
really
good to see you
appreciate
doing
you.
the same thing. And they ain't deterred you from doing what it is you're supposed to be doing.
Right,
You
like
know?
you said, they on me now.
Oh, I
I ain't
know that.
stopping
You
though.
ain't got to tell me that. I know that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know
that's
that,
all
bro.
right.
May
Yeah, I'm good for it.
Allah protect you and give you success in everything that you're trying to do, my brother.
Yes, indeed. Yes,
I look
indeed.
forward to seeing we got to break bread sometime when you get back here.
Yeah, next time I come to Cleveland, I'll stop by the mosque
Okay,
and
I
we'll sit
appreciate
down
it.
and
You
talk
got
to
my
you.
number. We can hook up anywhere.
Okay, okay. See you soon,
All
King.
right,
Peace.
peace.